We are now going to be talking about George Lungren. George Lungren, formerly George Nordgren, is a third grader who attends Lakewood Elementary School in Mr. Rapburn's class. He daydreams frequently and is a skilled carpenter and ventriloquist. His family is Swedish, but has been seen wearing a shirt saying, "I love Norway." In the long road home, although he may simply be of a Swedish-Norwegian descent, in LaDonna's like list, it was said that he was from Norway. He has a ventriloquist dummy, a wooden giraffe named Wally. He is often shown as isolated from the other children. This is possibly because of his nosebleeds, which occurs on a regular basis, or it may be that he is simply a quiet person, or both. However, in the later seasons, like most of the other children, he has effectively socialized into the group. Also, his nosebleeds have only happened in one episode. Though in earlier seasons, George is shown as a background character with a very few talking roles. Starting in season 9, he made a transition into a main character, appearing in a good portion of episodes. It is unknown why this sudden change happened. In The Boy with His Head in the Clouds, George is revealed to have dyslexia. In Arthur's Perfect Christmas, George does celebrate Christmas, but he celebrates it in a different way than the other kids in Elwood City, since his mom is from Sweden. On Christmas, according to Norwegian tradition, they would dance and parade in traditional clothes and eat traditional Christmas food. He has a friend named Carl. George also has a sister who only appeared in earlier episodes, also as a background character. He is 8 years old, he's a male, he's a moose, his eye color is blue, complexion brown, his favorite color is fuzzy wuzzy brown and blue. He lives in his house in Elwood City. Neil Lundgren is his father, Mrs. Lundgren, mother, George's sister, George's grandmother, George's father, George's cousin, George's uncle. He made his first appearance in the cartoon Arthur's Eyes, so I'm guessing he was never in the books. He was voiced by Mitchell Rothpan, Season 1, 7 in some of the games, Evan Smirnow in Season 8, Eleanor Noble, Season 9 to 11 to 14, and Samantha Reynolds, Season 12 to 13. Description: George is an anthropomorphic moose whose most distinctive trait is his antlers. As a result of his horns, he was often given nicknames such as Bighorns in the episode Bighorns George and Headgear in the episode Nicked by a Name. However, his antlers also give him disadvantages, as his horns accidentally knock coats off their racks by accident and getting his head stuck in his locker. George is depicted as wearing an orange shirt, cream-colored chockies, and green and white sneakers. In a promotional illustration on the show's official website, he was depicted wearing a beige shirt, blue shorts, and red and white sneakers. During the wintertime, George can be seen wearing a green jacket with a red hat with flaps. In the summertime, George wears a green shirt, short chockies, and green and white sneakers. Personality: since his first appearance in Arthur's Eyes, George was depicted as a background character and was not made into a major character until Arthur's Dummy disaster, much later. This could be as a result of how quiet he is at school, and the fact that he's also rather shy. Despite his timidness, George is shown to be a very kind character, as he is willing to help his friends, even if it means sacrificing his own needs. However, his quiet attitude is often misinterpreted by the other characters, and as a result, he is often forgotten and left out of many of their events. It is the result of being isolated from the other characters that caused George to play mostly with his dummy Wally. George is shown to treat Wally very much like a real person, even though he is well aware he isn't real, and often discusses his problems at school with him, as he rarely gets the chance to speak with his classmates. George is defender for the Lakewood Elementary soccer team. He has been given several nicknames: Hammer by Binky in The Boy with His Head in the Clouds, Bighorns by Coco Taylor in Bighorns George, and Headgear by Brain in Nicked by a Name. Friends: although George might be isolated at times, he's proven to care for others, even if they might occasionally be mean to him, which makes him very likable amongst Arthur and his group of friends for being so kind and forgiving. George's best friend is Carl. When Carl met George was the first time Carl and George met. Carl is also one of the rare people George doesn't use Wally to talk to, because he tried showing Wally to Carl one time and it frightened Carl. Fern seems to be very close to George. She and George are usually seen together acting out a detective scenario where George is her assistant, similar to Sherlock and Watson. In the case of the girl with the long face, he becomes very concerned for her and thinks she's depressed when she suddenly stops their game and seems unlike herself. The Brain. In the episode Do You Speak George, when everyone was speaking their own languages, the Brain and George decided to work together to make their own unique language. They ended up not agreeing on how their language should be. The brain also helps George have a better understanding on Carl's Asperger's syndrome and when Carl met George. Buster Baxter. George and Buster are great pals. George admires Buster enough to write a paper about how and why he's so admirable. Buster is known to stand up for George's well-being occasionally, like when Francine knocked George's dominoes down and Buster confronted her and explained she should apologize. Arthur Reed. George describes one of his best days ever as when Arthur talked to him and helped him after Wally fell apart. There's times when they hang out and when they're playing cards at George's house as Binky came over. Arthur told Binky, George isn't home right now. Knowing poor, George is scared of Binky. Jenna Morgan. George and Jenna are classmates at Lakewood Elementary. After learning that she had claimed to have a crush on him in Jenna's bedtime blues, he approached her, displaying an apparent interest of his own. They also appeared together on numerous occasions. And we're going to go to his trivia. Future life. If the intro to the episode The Election is truly in the future, he will either be future President Muffy's running mate or a member of her party. Trivia. George has been watching the Love Ducks every day for a year, even before Arthur and his friends did. He is seen playing a guitar in Bighorn's George and The Pride of Lakewood, although George also plays a guitar called Bonnie in Looking for Bonnie, but in his dreams. Vomitrocious is the only episode that George spoke in that Wally did not appear. George wins many talent competitions by jumping on a pogo stick. George constantly wins contests that Elwood City kids enter. Despite being bullied by Binky, George is at times seen with him and even going to the Ferris wheel together once. For the assignment in Desert Island Dish, George brought a pumpkin, and maybe a food that he enjoys. During early production, he was known only as Moose. Molly calls him Moose Boy and the last tough customer. George's last name was Nordgren before season 11. He has dyslexia, so people try to offend him by using his weakness. Molly McDonald used this in The Last Tough Customer. He has Scandinavian ancestry. According to an interview with the podcast Elwood City Limits, Rich Morris, former character designer, states that Mark Brown was originally not a fan of George. Morris says that George was just called the Moose Kid. George was almost a cut character, but the animators liked him and included him gradually through the first few seasons of the show. George is one of the characters most likely to refer to or be referred to by his species. Moose aren't funny. You look like a coat rack, Moose Boy. He also does things with his antlers that no human could do, hanging Christmas tree ornaments on them or getting stuck in a locker. George nearly always refers to his antlers as horns. The difference is that the antlers, moose deer, are made of bone and are shed and regrown every year, while horns are permanent curtain structures on bone sockets. In real moose, only adult males have antlers. On the show, all the Lundgrens have them. And that's all about George, so see ya.